Hey, what's happening everyone? Thank you guys so much for checking out this review. So I was planning to do this review a little bit earlier, but here's what happened. It was a friend of mine's birthday, so a group of us, we went and saw the Meg, and then after the Meg, the friends whose birthday it was, she was like, well, kind of want to see Talk to Me. I'm like, Talk to Me is like second best film of the year. We can wait on that Meg review. Ended up doing a Meg 2, Talk to Me double feature. I gotta say, it is... If you thought that Barbenheimer was a trip of a double feature, do not see the Meg 2 and then see Talk to Me. My God. But we've made it through. It's time to get this review over with. So I'm just gonna say, right before I saw the Meg 2, the moments leading up to parking the car and seeing the movie, when I saw that this film was at a whopping 18%, it was a 2-hour movie to the film that I just saw 3 days ago and pretty much roasted, I was kind of starting to panic. So I'm going to be honest, the intro that we get for this movie, minor spoiler, but it's the first fucking scene. That being this dino flashback sequence. Obviously in the trailer it says, 65 million years ago, something bullshit about how the Meg has been around for 65 million years. As we know, the dinosaurs have too. That was a fun creature feature sequence. Also, yes, I did see this movie in 3D, but with me being a fan of creature features, and with this supposedly being more of a horror film than the first Meg was, with this being in 3D, it actually kind of took away from what could have been, which could have been this eye candy creature feature adrenaline film. It's a 2-hour film, it's a creature feature, it's supposedly gonna be more of that horror theme, and I have said it, in the Meg 1 review, I've said it many times. I am a big fan of creature feature films. Not only creature feature films, but also shark films. And not only shark, but horror is my favorite genre. This had every reason for me to be excited, other than the fact that, yeah, I saw the first Meg and it was kind of garbage. Just how goofy the CGI looked. That's what I mean. Everything that I was hoping for out of this film, and everything that could have worked in this film and actually kind of did, which we will get to eventually, how goofy the CGI looked, especially in 3D, it was just so distracting that it took away from everything that could have been in this movie. As I said earlier, I saw this with a group of my friends, and there was one point throughout the movie where one of my friends looked over at me and she goes, I just hate how everything looks so fucking fake in this movie. I hate how fake everything looks. And that really just is the bottom line here. So the first couple things I will say is that, surprisingly, when shark shit wasn't going down, that was when the movie was looking its best. And yeah, maybe that's because there wasn't so much bullshit expensive CGI to look at, let alone in 3D right in your face. But in saying that, this is still a 3D viewing experience that I had. And as a 3D creature feature shark, hopefully horror, more horror experience that I was really looking forward to, the scenes that did not need to be in 3D, for example, when Jason Statham's character was on screen, I didn't hate him as much. He did not feel like the center of this movie. He wasn't being dead ass Jason Statham, especially let alone in 3D. During the shit that should have been the most exciting during 3D, it was so exhausting and so in your face fucking fake that during those scenes where it wasn't the Meg or a shark film, it did feel more digestible to a degree. Not saying that those sequences or aspects were any better than the shark sequences. I mean, we knew what we were coming in for. This was the Meg 2. Or at least I knew what I was getting myself into. But it's I did not spend $15 a ticket on this movie to see the filler shit in 3D. Let alone the filler shit. I mean, let's just be real. And maybe it's because I saw this film in 3D, or maybe it's just because the filler here didn't feel like it was really like one plot. It feels sillier, it feels looser, it feels a little bit more careless, but also in saying that, like a little bit more self-aware. And you still feel at times that even though there is not a creature on screen during this time, that it's still embracing the 3D enough, or at least for my viewing experience. Again, this does not go like for the people who saw this in 2D. For the people that saw this in 2D, I can't even imagine, but for a 3D viewing experience, it did not feel like a complete cash grab. But still, it is that thing where it's like, the filler is just so not interesting enough that you do just have to get real with the film and you're like, dude, this is a 3D 2-hour shark movie. You know I didn't come for this shit. Let's get this over with. This obviously does not need to be 2 hours. You could have made it a 90-minute shark movie, but you didn't for whatever fucking reason. Like, I'm sorry, but depending on what your film is and how you are marketing it, you need to be self-aware of that. Like, even as someone who just came from viewing the first movie in theaters a few days ago for the first time, that continuation aspect, like that next chapter feel, it is just non-existent here, even for how dumb the first film was. It felt like the film didn't have a plot. It felt like it could have had any plot, any story, and it wouldn't have mattered. Like, it wouldn't have made any difference. But I will say, I would actually state that, at least in the first act or so of this movie, there is much more actual shark sequence, like actual Meg, than the first Meg movie. Albeit not as tame, not as suspenseful, but there is shark. I'll also say this, there is some stuff in this film that feels new, or at least feels newer. It feels fresh enough for, you know, like, what you, like, it feels fresh enough and new enough to deliver on a Meg sequel. Like, for example, there's this chase scene of sorts, kind of like what we got with the first Meg, you know, where it's like a chase sequence between the ship and the Meg, but in this sequence, it takes place like at the bottom of the ocean. It's very dark, and for whatever reason, I can't really remember. I'm sorry, guys, I saw Talk to Me right after I saw this movie. But there's like a bunch of like rocks and boulders falling, and they're trying to navigate through all this without getting crushed. There's also a lot of new involvement with new gadgets, which I actually did find fun, not only with how they use them, but for what they actually were. Like, in the first movie, I was just kind of like, okay, this just seems like dorky bro hybrid tech shark movie fusion stuff. Where in this movie, there's this scene where, well, there's actually a lot of scenes where they're actually underwater and they have this suit that can kind of keep them glued to the bottom of the ocean. It can allow them to like walk around at the bottom of the ocean, and obviously it's pitch dark and everything. Another thing that is just another factor that I found a lot of fun for like what it is, but also kind of adds to that sequence, is that there's just a lot of creatures in this film. This is not just a Meg like or a shark movie. There's a lot of involvement with this octopus that's kind of like hunting them down. The second half of this film actually kind of feels like it wanted to be a Jurassic Park or like a Predator film. Even the first half of this film where I'm talking about how they have these suits and they're walking around the trench and kind of exploring it, and there's all these different creatures that are kind of like preying on them. It kind of reminded me of like the film Alien, where they're walking around the ship and they're trying to, you know, like watch their backs and they feel like something is like hunting them down. That felt like this, except in the trench with just sea creatures that, yes, again, look expensive and cheap, but embrace that creature feature theme enough, at least for that goofy taste of mine. Also, yes, that dino sequence that I was talking about earlier, and even how I said that the second half kind of feels like it wants to be like a Jurassic Park film in a lot of ways. Well, that actually has a lot of involvement with the movie and the story and the plot itself. Like, I would actually say that that deserves a lot of credit as far as actually keeping this movie going. Like, as far as it feeling or wanting to be a Jurassic Park or Predator film, again, is not and does not look as good, but inspired. Like, I would honestly say that there's two characters that actually stole this movie for me. The first one was these salamander things. They feel like dinosaurs in a way, but just with the atmosphere, with all of the like elements that this includes from an action creature feature film, most notably inspired by Jurassic World, you could definitely see that they wanted to make a dinosaur and Meg film. At many times, more so a dinosaur film. And those dino characters, those salamanders, those little bastards, yeah, they actually stole the movie from me, where I was like, at the end of the movie, I had two thoughts. I was like, one, please don't make a third Meg, which you probably will. You have the money for it. There's actually like 7 novels that these films are based off of. Fuck me. But if you do make another Meg film, again, which you will, I would actually be so down for a salamander like spin-off movie. Like, make an origin movie about them in whatever fashion you choose to tell it. Just make it about them, kind of like you did with the second half of this film. I would totally be down for that. Also, the character DJ, the comedic character from the first movie, so he doesn't come until like more or less the second half of the film, but when he comes in, they give him a lot to do. Not just a lot of comedy, and not just a lot of comedy that had me like actually laughing, kind of like in a surprising way like I did with the first one, but just as a character, he gets a lot to do where I'm just like, why did they have him do that? But the fact that they did have him do that, I'm just glad that, surprisingly, he got more to do than Statham did. Like, I would not say that either Statham or the Meg are main characters in this film. Like, the Meg especially, again, there are so many creatures in this film where this just feels like a goofy creature feature film, and the Meg is just a side character. It shows up a lot in the first act, but there's not that suspense. It doesn't ever feel like not only an actual threat, but like the main threat either. Like, it doesn't even have, as far as I remember, like a solid intro. It's got a lot of screen time, a lot more screen time than the first movie, and the first half anyway feels more or less like more of an actual shark movie. Like, what it comes down to, guys, the bottom line of what I can say about this film is that in some ways it does things better than the first. In some ways it doesn't do things as good as the first. The things that I think that it does better than the first, that being the creature feature aspects and like the underwater sequences, especially, again, this is just for my personal experience, a 3D viewing, but the things that I wouldn't say it does as good as the first, that being the first movie's surprising amounts of suspense. If there was a movie with the good things from this movie and the good things from the first, that would be classic. But what it comes down to, guys, is that there are a lot of scenes, not including the shark, that just felt kind of meaningless. And there are a lot of scenes that included the shark that just looked fucking bad. And for a 3D shark movie especially, this film just kind of felt empty. And overall, guys, I'm gonna give Meg 2 The Trench a mixed review. So that is my take on the Meg 2. I would actually say that's more or less on par as the first movie. Again, some things it does better, some things it doesn't do quite as good. Do I think it's as bad as that 22%, whereas the first one has like a 45? No. I think that they're quite on par, but it is, my god, a sequel to the first Meg. Again, just with a different director and some things it improves on, but some things it also lacks upon the first. But yes, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up for this video. That is going to do it for my thoughts on the Meg 2. Are you guys planning on seeing this movie? Are you guys going to see this one, or are you guys going to see the Ninja Turtles, for example? Let me know of what you guys are going to be checking out this week, and let me know of what you guys thought about my review, as well as your personal thoughts on the Meg 2 for those that did see it. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to wrap the video up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a great night, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.